World of Warcraft has some pretty fantastic raids, and I dare say the MMO with the best raids out of all the other countless MMOs that are on the market. Not just in mechanics, not just on bosses, but the looks, and all the emotions that it gives us while we are battling that impossible foe, or the music, or just their art. For that, I'm going to talk about the greatest raids that we have stepped our minds on, almost a tribute to them, if you will. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to caveat first. This is my choices due to my own personal experiences from the 10 years I've had in WoW, and because it's my video. Second, I will also take in consideration the overall opinion of the community of what they regard as the best raids of all time by looking at various forums and fan sites. And third, what matters here is not how hard it was, how long it took the raiding guilds to kill that boss, but their design, their mechanics, their creativity, and all in between. Basically, what they made us feel every time we ran them, from that first time making our heart race to the very last time we ran through them. That said, let's get started.
Les peuples de ce monde vont disparaître. Ce n'est qu'une question de temps. Ferme les yeux.
Jack Hunt's video movie made back in the day really captured the essence of what Naxxramas was. I was just a lowly newbie scrub young teenager at the time. I barely knew English, and the notion of a raid to me was something that only the hardest of hardcore players would engage on. And in case of the original Naxxramas was practically that, as only 1% of the population got to see it during its progression. So I didn't got to play it then, as probably most of you, only the watered down version of Wrath of the Lich King. Yet Naxxramas, from its time of release to years into the game, at least until it was remade, it was always held in such high regard, even though a large portion of the players didn't got to see it. Yet such mystique and praise surrounded this raid, not only because of how hard it was at the time, but all that it represented. For one, it was the last tier raid, that on itself always created this big obstacle that you had to surpass, as raiding and progression isn't like it is today. If you wanted to raid Naxxramas, you had to go through all of the previous raid tiers to even hope of entering it, starting all the way down in the Molten Core no matter what point in time you started playing the game. You always had to take the path and journey that the older players did before. And then you had the lore aspect of being this scourge stronghold, just there floating above us, taunting us into facing its challenges. And then you had the aesthetics, the huge, creepy halls, littered with undead, plague, huge spiders, abominations, and death knights. The eerie music constantly in the background, mixed with the screamings of its dying victims, to the great and grotesque boss designs, not just in mechanics, but simply how they looked. Saphiron is a great example, a huge undead dragon, just forming with its collective of bones right before your eyes, giving you shivers down your spine and making you wonder what you were about to face. Now, was it really all that hard? Not really. Most of the community agrees that the challenge that came with Naxxramas was not on its mechanics per se. They were rather simple, with one or two tactics that you had to worry about, besides bosses like the Gothic, the Harvester requiring top-notch coordination, the Four Horsemen requiring 8 tanks. It was a weird time. And Kel Thuzad and Saphiron themselves, the rest was rather simple. What made them harder was actually the management and coordination of the 40 people in the raid, and the communication between them in a 40-man scenario was always a challenge on its own. Then the gear. Remember that this was the last raid in the game, so it was expected everyone to be wearing tier 2 and tier 2.5, which was the previous raid content. Good luck getting 40 plus people with that amount of gear level. And then there was the understanding of game mechanics. Most of the people at the time, even the best skills in the world, did not fully understood how the game worked. at the fact that specific classes needed to do specific mechanics, so you needed good players to do them at a time when even the best players were clickers. Plus, add-ons and general info on bosses was very hard to come by, so it was the perfect stage for chaos to ensue. And not to mention bad internet and lag from the game servers themselves and the ludicrous amount of consumables, buffs, and element resistance items you had to bring. Still, it set a precedent in raid design that is still used by Blizzard through this very day. For one, it was the first raid designed non-linearly. Sure, Molten Core wasn't completely linear and Zul'Gurub was fully open, but Naxxramas set the ideal of raids designed with wings, that you could choose at any point which boss you wanted to challenge first, and slowly make your way to unlock the last bosses. A design still used in raids such as the Nighthold and the Emerald Nightmare now in Legion. It also set a precedent for the first raid ever to include a Gearshek boss like Patchwork. Either you love it or you hate it, is still a design idea used to this day. As many other mechanics used in current raiding, a lot of them were first introduced in the Naxxramas. As for me, as I said, I only did the remade version, and as I entered, I played that Jack Hunt's video once again. I was late to the party, and even though it disappointed me in its difficulty, all the rest was as great as I imagined. All those years passed. Back to the time I was a lowly noob, running around the Eastern Plaguelands only to try and find that floating necropolis. Little did I know that even if I did, I couldn't enter due to needing to be attuned, and good luck explaining what was attunement to me at the time. But even if I never did the original, I still held it and do in high regard, as most of the community around its time. And that is something amazing that no other raid ever accomplished, and probably never will again. The mystique of the unobtainable.
Let them come. Frostmourne hungers.
The Icecrown Citadel, containing one of the most beloved characters out of all the Warcraft franchise, Arthas, the Lich King. And the most memorable moments we have from this raid is exactly that fight. One of the best, thematically most well-designed fights in the game. The sense of impending doom as the icy floor crumbled beneath our feet, the dialogue, the fact that he literally kills us, all of the group, to turn us into his minions, really added to the fight and the sense of how powerful the Lich King was. The conclusion to one of the most well-written characters within the Warcraft universe, starting all the way in Warcraft 3, only to finish here, and what an end it was. Arthas really made the Icecrown Citadel, but wasn't just that fight that made it a great raid. The music, the environment, the theme of the bitter cold and death was really well portrayed in the frozen halls of the Citadel. Then you had bosses like Rotface and Festergut with their Professor Putricide, with their unique dialogue and personality, a rare feature on bosses with almost no background lore. Or the Blood Queen with its unique vampire-like mechanics, one of the most entertaining fights in the raid in my opinion, along with the Blood Prince Council or Cindergrosa herself, or even the gunship battle. Even though a not very engaging or interesting fight, it helped alleviate from all of that death and gore within the raid. Overall, almost all the encounters within the Icecrown felt unique on their own, and the 25 heroic mode proved quite a challenge to go along with that. Sure, Lord Merogar might have become a little bit of a meme with him bone-storming more, but overall a great boss design throughout. And the same goes for the environment and how, in general, the raid was designed, going from the bottom and slowly making our way to the Frozen Throne, while fighting an unending horde of undead minions is always a cool feeling to add to a raid. But what really made Icecrown Citadel was the lore aspect. Not just on the last chapter of the Lich King, but all the little stories. Like the emotional finale to Sourfang's son, killed and turned to the Scourge at the Wrathgate, of which many will argue is one of the best questlines in the game. Only for us to defeat him and see his father carrying his son on his arms back to the ship. Something that we rarely see now in raiding.
Then came Illidan, the one they call the Betrayer, the enemy of my enemy.
The Black Temple. This was one of the places that I experienced the most treasured memories I have from raiding. I was still a little bit of a noob when TBC launched, but it was here that I started getting a deeper understanding of how the game worked. Black Temple soon released just a few months into the expansion, and similar to the original Naxxramas, a mystique surrounded the raid, due to how challenging it was, but also because once again, if you wanted to step into the Black Temple, you had to take the journey that was the Burning Crusade. One unique feature of the Black Temple was that you really felt that you were assaulting or raiding this once prestige temple, now felt corrupted and full of demonic creatures, secretly going through the sewers, battling Naga, only to emerge and see the army of fell orcs on nether drakes and a huge infernal that you will surely enough face. Was one of the coolest sights I've ever seen in a raid. Sure, Supremus might have been a simplistic boss, but was still a sight to behold. Only then to enter the actual temple and keep on climbing to the top, only to face the man himself, crouching looking over the skull of Gul'dan while Azeroth floated over us. Here, and like Icecrown Citadel after it, Black Temple housed one of the best characters in Warcraft, Illidan Stormrage. Not only one of the best characters, but the, and yes, the best design fight of all time, both mechanically and visually, melded perfectly. I didn't get him to defeat him at release, it took me a while later on in the expansion when he was a little bit nerfed, but even then was one of the best feelings I'd ever had in WoW. But it wasn't just Illidan, but Theron, Gorfind, Reliquary of Souls and the Illidari Council were also brilliantly designed fights. Thankfully, Time Walking Black Temple will be available in the 7.2.5 patch, where we'll be able to somewhat recreate these memories and get back some of the nostalgia. But what made Black Temple great was indeed Illidan himself. The overall design of the raid in a very similar way to Icecrown Citadel, or more correctly the other way around. But also the hardship that came into even being able to raid it. All the challenges that you had to partake added to the overall raid, starting with heroic dungeons, Karazhan, going over Gruul's and Magteradan's lair, the Eye, the Serpentshire Cavern, and only then you could step in the Black Temple, no matter what point you started playing the expansion. All of that combined added to the raid, something not every player could achieve and arguably quite time-consuming, until Sunwell was released and some catch-up mechanics were introduced. But for me, Icecrown Citadel and Black Temple practically share the same place, but nostalgia will take the winning place here. Karazhan. What's there not to like about it? Was it this hardcore raid where it took the best guilds in the world months to finish it? No. Was it incredibly challenging? No, not really. It had its challenges, but for the most part was a pretty easygoing raid across the board, be for hardcore players or casual ones. But none of that took away the great design and creativity that went along with it. What other raid can you say that I battled ghosts and undead butlers to a creepy theater to find hidden bosses in bookshelves dragons, weird floating rooms to a chess battle, and only to finish off by battling an Eredar prince in the Twisting Nether. And some of these bosses were entirely optional, with different difficulty spikes that you could choose to face in the future as your team obtain ever better gear, but all unique on their own right, both in mechanics and identity. Karazhan was the first raid ever in the game to introduce the 10 mode player, and might have received some slack because of it, especially coming from the 40 man that was vanilla, but that soon stopped being an issue as Karazhan truly demonstrated the amount of creativity that Blizzard could put in their game. The music with its haunting organ sounds, the environments and boss design and overall mechanics, absolutely everything in Karazhan was molded perfectly together. It almost felt like an adventure when you stepped in for the first time. Room after room felt fresh, with something unpredictable and exciting. The sense of wonder was with each and every moment, be the bosses, the rooms, and just questioning yourself to what the hell was going on in that tower. On a gameplay standpoint, it had its issues. When first announced, the gear felt subpar in comparison to other content, but that was soon fixed, and Karazhan went on to be the most played raid in all of the Burning Crusade. I still remember deep in the Stunwell patch, the last patch of TBC, guilds were still recruiting to start raiding Karazhan, something that no other raid has ever been able to accomplish, and at the same time still being, well, fun. The remake of Karazhan as a dungeon in Legion just further proves that point, that it was a fantastic raid, one of the best in a game and not just a work of nostalgia. It was also the first raid that made me fall in love with raiding as a whole. I was still learning the game then, but Karazhan taught me so much while just being awesome in the process, and I couldn't ask for a better teacher.
He won't stop talking about this presence he felt, permeating the great halls, stirring in their minds, chilling their blood. He said, the horror that the Titans imprisoned so long ago, Yogg-Saron has awakened.
Ulduar, and is still highly regarded as the best raid of all time, and is not hard to see why. Similar to Karazhan, Ulduar shared amazing creativity in its raid design across the board. I remember when it was first announced and that trailer with Bran Bronzebeard. I didn't follow much of the game events, nor did I knew much about the game's lore, so the mystery of what was in Ulduar really stuck with me, and raiding it was simply something that I felt obligated to do. I had quit raiding at the time as I was tired of Naxxramas, ironically, so I quickly joined an hardcore-ish guild preparing to raid Ulduar 5 to 6 days a week. And even though that took a toll on me, I don't regret a single minute of it. When you first entered Ulduar, you were greeted with monolithic, titanic structures and a vast army of iron dwarves. The immersion and the first impression to what you were about to face was perfectly set up. Then it was followed by using vehicles, which some might have hated, but for me though, it added a unique twist. And as soon as you breached that first obstacle, you were greeted with distinct bosses like XT. Who doesn't remember slamming its face while it went into a tantrum and started pounding the ground while screaming with its childlike voice of how we were its new toys? Then the Titan Keepers. Every boss in Ulduar felt epic and memorable. The one thing that added to them and the overall raid was the scale. Almost every boss was huge, and so was most of the zones, adding to the immersion and to that badass feeling while battling those said bosses. And wasn't just the titanic walls that Ulduar presented to you. Oh no, they still managed to fit in frozen and green lush areas due to their respective keepers that seemingly were corrupted by a dark force. What truly was noteworthy in Ulduar was the mystery. As you delved deeper into the complex, you slowly discovered its secrets, what lied behind every corner and door, what had broken free, what was underneath it, and what had happened to it, while at the same time it retained its laid-back feel with XT or Mimiron, with their unforgettable dialogue and personality, in a way similar to Karazhan. Ulduar never felt boring, neither on the bosses or on the environment department. But when you reached that final area, descending those broken halls, only to find a huge old god aberration, to Yogg-Saron himself, emerging from its broken prison as you killed its minions. Its screams still vivid to me through this very day. For sure, one of the creepiest voices within the World of Warcraft. But without doubt, what was great about Ulduar was the flexible difficulty level. At first, it was introduced as a normal 10 and 25 player mode raid, which was the norm at the time. But then it also had an increase in difficulty for all bosses depending on the choice of the group, actively turning them on during gameplay, instead of just going into your UI and choosing its difficulty. Want to fight Flame Leviathan in hard mode to receive better loot and present a better challenge? Then choose which towers you want to destroy beforehand. Want to activate the heroic mode of XT, then destroy its heart during its respective phase. If your DPS is enough, then said mode will activate. Want to defeat Yogg-Saron with the help of the keepers for the buffs? If so, how many? Depending on your skill, you could choose to take on those challenges, rewarding you with better loot and in the process making the raid more immersive and alive. Almost every boss was presented with that dynamic of defeating it, instead of a linear one like we have currently, for the most part, kickstarting the idea of having heroic and normal mode raids for the future to come. And on top of that, you still had the hidden boss, Algalon, on this beautiful celestial room, only reachable after an attunement quest, having 1 hour period per week to defeat him. If you failed, well, try again the next lockout. And it presented quite a challenge in the beginning. And not to talk about the music with its powerful orchestral sounds combined perfectly with the overall theme of the raid. Honestly, I could talk about it for ages, but I think the video has gone on long enough. It's quite sad though that after just a few months of progressing through Ulduar, it was replaced by one of the worst raids of all time, Trial of the Champion, making it completely obsolete with its catch-up mechanics in gear set in place. But from the moment you step in Ulduar to the very last boss, it felt like an adventure that you conquered, and that is how a raid should feel. And that's it for this list. I hope you enjoyed it, and as for the Legion raids, they are actually some of the best in the recent years, in my opinion. Emerald Nightmare was a little bit still, but Nighthold and soon to be Tomb of Sargeras are and seem to be extremely well-designed raids that could easily make the list. But all of these raids here created an example, a model, if you will, that most raids released afterwards followed. Tomb of Sargeras, in some ways, it seems to follow the design model of Ulduar and bringing in some pretty interesting ideas, and for that I cannot wait to see. But if I were to include Legion raids, would most likely be a Legion raid dedicated video at the end of the expansion, where everything is perfectly set in stone. Alright guys, please make sure to subscribe to get more videos like this, or just for the class guides or general WoW videos. Smash that like button, have fun, and bye bye.